Everyone, it's Miss Tremblay. Today I am going to talk to you guys about our next project, which is a cut paper project. So cut paper is something that has been slowly becoming more popular in the art world. And several years ago, when I was still working at JMU and working in the gallery, we had a cut paper show. And I was just so impressed by what people had been able to do with paper because I never felt like I had that much control over paper. And I couldn't imagine doing the kind of work that these artists were doing. So we are going to do a much less intensive cut paper project. And here are a couple examples of some really nice cut paper work. So these are, professional artists who are making these pieces. So with cut paper work, it can be much more two-dimensional and flat. It can be more three-dimensional, so you can see that this is designed to kind of stick out from the page. And then there are artists who actually make sculptures completely out of paper. So for this project, the materials that you are going to need are Bristol board. And if you picked up one of those packets at school, it is the heavier white paper that's in there. So not the kind of see-through paper, that's your Duralar for your last project. And the black paper is your scratch board. So it's that piece of paper that's remaining, and it's a very heavy piece of paper. It's much more like thin cardboard, but it has a really shiny white surface, and that's called Bristol board. If you didn't get the packet, you can use any sort of heavier paper. You just want something that's not going to bend and flop around as you're working on it. So something heavier. If all you have is cardboard, the cardboard cover to a sketchbook, cardboard from an Amazon package, you can certainly use something like that. I did not put glue in your kit, so you are going to need your own glue. So rubber cement is the best type of glue to use for a project like this because if you make a mistake, you can pick up what you put down and just move it around. So rubber cement takes many, many years to dry. So it's nice for correcting errors because you can just pick the paper up and put it down somewhere else. But if all you have is Elmer's, you could definitely use Elmer's. I would thin it with a little water and brush it on with a paintbrush. And if you don't have that, you could do a flour, like a wheat paste, so flour, water, and use that as kind of your last resort. Decoupage would work too if you have Mod Podge at home. But my number one recommendation is rubber cement. You're going to need paper. So you can really use any kind of paper for this project. This is a piece that was done entirely with junk mail. So we get tons of paper in the mail every day. We get magazines that we just throw away. We have old greeting cards sitting around. You could obviously use very nice high quality paper like this artist has done, but it's not necessary. This artist made a really cool collage with just junk mail. So you have a lot of options, and you're going to be surprised at how much paper you just have lying around the house that you can use. And you're going to need scissors or an X-Acto. Obviously, an X-Acto is going to give you very precise lines. Scissors are going to give you a lot of control too, and you might be surprised that you can work with scissors and do this whole project. But if you want a project that looks a little rougher and softer, you can tear all of your paper. So if you don't have scissors or an X-Acto, you can still do this project. And then you're going to need a reference image. I recommend that if you can print your image out, you print it out. If not, I would pull it up on your Chromebook so that it's larger and easier to see. All right, so cut paper is really pretty simple because you really only have two processes for how you're cutting your paper. So you can cut it by hand with an X-Acto with a pair of scissors, and you're going to get very clean, precise lines. So here, to get this texture in the rabbit's fur, this artist has gone in probably with an X-Acto knife and done very precise cuts. Or you can tear your paper. So this piece was done with torn paper, and you can really see the edges. So when you tear paper, there's often going to be a white edge, even if the paper is colored on both sides. There's usually going to be a white edge to the paper. So you can see all of these pieces have white edges. But she still managed to create a really beautiful design, a really beautiful collage, just by tearing paper that she had. So to actually assemble your pieces, you've got two different approaches for assembling. The first is to layer and stack everything. So in this picture of Elsa, each different color of paper has been stacked on top of the one below it. So we start with the blue background, and then we have the snowflakes and this blue snowflake, which are kind of the same layer. This sparkly paper was then layered on top with some snowflakes on top of that. So right away we have several layers. She might have used something to kind of make Elsa higher than the rest of the page, so there might be little, foam pieces underneath. But you can see with her hair, each piece has been stacked. Then she put the face piece on, and then continue to stack the pieces of Elsa's hair. And I can't quite tell if she's drawn the face in or if she's actually cut paper on there. But again, you've got more cut paper stacked both in front and behind. And then finally there is a frame that is the highest piece. So if you don't have little pieces of foam to lift pieces up like this, you can stack the way she's stacked the hair. And you will get a three-dimensional effect just by doing that. The other approach is the mosaic approach. So if you're worried that you're going to kind of lose your composition and lose track of what you were doing, the mosaic approach is just like doing a tile mosaic, where you're cutting out pieces that kind of fit, the shape of each of these. So it's like putting together a puzzle. So this is a bit of a looser approach, and it works. But if you want everything to look really clean and precise, you are going to have to be very clean and precise with everything that you do with cutting out your pieces. So the mosaic approach is definitely challenging if you want everything to look very, very neat. I've got some examples of student work, and I will be doing this project along with you guys. So I will be doing demonstrations, and I'll try to make a piece that incorporates all of the techniques so that you can see everything. So this student chose to stack and layer everything. So she had to think about what was going on first and what was going on second. She had to do some pretty intensive cutting here for the little strips in these lanterns. And you can see in places like the background with trees, it was pretty easy to just kind of make generic shapes. She didn't try to cut out like leaves. She just cut out large swatches of green so that, she wasn't going to be doing this for the next 15 years. So think about that too. How much detail do you really want to cut into your piece? So this student chose to do some smaller detail pieces like the grass, but not to do like every single little blade of grass, every single little clump of grass. So she put just enough small pieces in there so that you knew that there was some grass on top of this kind of rocky desert mountain that this person is sitting on. And she was using paint chips, so she only had small pieces of blue, so you can see the seams where her paint chips overlap. And then finally, this student did the same thing, the layering technique. So she really had to think about which pieces were going to be on top of each other. So these rocks need to overlap the water, but this water needs to overlap the rocks. So she really had to think about the placement of all her pieces. Less so here, where clearly the sky was first and then the back mountains, and she layered the mountains and the buildings until she got to the water, and then she layered the water on. So if you're doing something that has any kind of background, you're going to want to start your background first. All right, so that is it for our project introduction. Make sure that you choose your image for this week because we're going to start working on this in week 2 of our 4th quarter.